Yep. Thanks, Cathaoirleach. Minister, in February 2005, the retained firefighters in the fire station in Bray staged a day-long protest over major concerns they had with regard to the operation of the service in the area. There were a number of issues of concern, including the vetting of calls. One of their main concerns, Minister, was the manning levels within the station. Minister, Bray is a two-pump station, which means there should be 15 firefighters. However, there were only 10 at that point. 2 years later, on the 26th of September 2017, Minister, 2 of those firefighters that took part in that day of protest died in the line of duty serving the community of Bray. Sub-Officer Brian Murray and firefighter Mark O'Shaughnessy died fighting a very serious fire in the Little Bray area. Brian had said prior to his death, Minister, that unless the serious issues in the fire service were addressed, somebody would lose their life. Little did he know, 2 years later, it would be himself and one of his colleagues. Minister, 14 years after the protest at the station in Bray and 12 years after the deaths of Brian and Mark, there are still very serious issues with the fire service in Wicklow. In a recent response I got from Aidan Dempsey, who is the Chief Fire Officer in County Wicklow, it shows that the current manning levels in the Bray station are 10, and 2 of those are on long-term sick leave. So out of an establishment of what is supposed to be 15, there are in fact 8 firefighters to provide cover for a population of nearly 40,000, Minister. This means that for an emergency call-out requiring a 2-pump turnout, which Bray is supposed to have but can't due to a lack of staff, the service in Greystones, the retained service, has to be dispatched to Bray. This not only takes additional time, Minister, but it leaves the whole Greystones-Kilcool area without a service if an emergency occurs. The management of the fire service in Wicklow is playing a dangerous game with people's lives, and clearly lessons haven't been learned from the horrific events of 2007 that seen 2 families lose their loved ones. There are clearly massive issues with the operation of the retained service in Bray. New recruits cannot be retained because, given how busy the station is, it is virtually impossible for them to hold down a full-time job and be on call at the same time. And also, due to the housing crisis, trying to find accommodation within the necessary 5-minute radius of the station is a massive challenge too. The population of Bray and North Wicklow is expected to expand considerably over the next 2 or 3 years. It has a high volume of high-risk buildings such as nursing homes. And the only way to protect lives and address the serious problems within the fire service in Wicklow is to provide a full-time service in the Bray area. However, we have a crazy situation in this state where we have 30 separate fire authorities, each managed and funded by local authorities across the state. So the bottom line is, Minister, in Bray, despite the need, it doesn't have a full-time fire service because Wicklow County Council cannot afford to provide one. So, Minister, what is going to be done to immediately address the serious problem with manning levels in the fire service in Wicklow? Yes, we need a full-time fire service in the Bray area that is based on need and risk as opposed to what can fit into the local authority's budget. And Minister, the only way that can be achieved is when the government actually implement the findings and recommendations of the 2002 Farrell Grant Spark report and create a national fire authority. And only then when we see a fire service that is properly funded and without having to rely on the resources from already financially stretched local authorities. So, Minister, can I ask, when will the findings of the Farrell Grant Spark report be implemented too?
Thank you, Deputy. Antara.
Thanks, Chair.
I want to thank the Deputy for raising this issue because I know he has a long-standing interest in this matter. But firstly, I suppose I'd like to take the opportunity to thank our firefighters up and down the length and breadth of the country and acknowledge their hard work, service and commitment. Indeed, Chair, I was lucky enough to be at the 20th anniversary of my own fire brigade station opening last Friday, and they do tremendous work. But I'd have to say that the Government is committed to supporting the fire services and the essential and invaluable services that they provide in any way we can. In terms of the fire service in Bray, the provision of a fire service in its functional area, including the establishment and the maintenance of a fire brigade, the assessment of fire cover needs and the provision of fire station premises, is a statutory function of the individual fire authorities under the Fire Services Act 1981 and 2003. Furthermore, under Section 159 of the Local Government Act of 2001, each Chief Executive is responsible for the staffing and the organisational arrangements necessary for carrying out the functions of the local authorities for which he or she is responsible. So it's therefore a matter for each individual Chief Executive to apply for the sanction from the Department and, once approved, recruit and assign the staff to the specific divisions within their organisation. So in the case of the Bray responsibility, it lies with Wicklow County Council. And the Department of Housing, Planning and Local Government supports fire authorities through setting general policy, providing a central training programme, issuing guidance and operational and other related matters, and providing capital funding support for equipment and priority infrastructural projects. So I understand that Wicklow Fire Service currently employs 91 people across 10 fire stations at Bray, Greystones, Wicklow, Rathdom, Arklow, Blessington, Dunlavin, Baltinglass, Carnew and Tinnahealy. And in the case of Bray Fire Station, I'm informed by Wicklow County Council that a series of early retirements last year in 2018 did, as you had suggested, result in a number of reduction in the number of firefighters in that house. However, I do understand that Wicklow County Council is moving to address the situation through recruitment of 4 new firefighters in Bray, having attempted to do so over the last 18 months. A risk assessment completed by the Council in March 2019 in relation to the level of staffing at the station found that almost half of the firefighters in the station were relatively and recently newly recruited. And therefore, for safety reasons and to allow the firefighters time to gain experience, a decision was taken by the Council not to recruit further new firefighters for the station at that time. I do, however, understand that Bray Fire Station currently has a crew of 8 and it is operational as a 1-fire engine station. And I'm informed there has been no issues turning out a full crew to all incidents and no impact on public safety as a result of that reduction. And I think it's fair to say that's due to the fine work of the personnel involved in Bray Station, augmented as and when it's required as colleagues in the station in Greystone, which is just nearby. I think it also should be noted that further backup is available to Bray if it's required from the 2 full-time crews in Dunleary, which is also relatively nearby. But I do understand the additional recruitment of firefighters for the Bray Fire Station is due to commence again in January 2020, which is only a number of weeks away, Deputy. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah. And the response outlines quite clearly all of the issues and all of the problems that we have, that it is the responsibility of the local authorities as opposed to a national fire authority, one body that implements based on risk and need, addresses and implements, I suppose, what is needed in an area. I outlined all of the difficulties with the fire service in Bray, not just during 2018. These issues went right back to 2005, and that's why the firemen took it upon themselves to walk out of the station because of the manning levels. There was low numbers at that stage, and here we are 14 years later with the same problems, the same issues, the same concerns. No one is questioning the skill, the training and the expertise of the firefighters. But what is failing is the state and the failure of the state to actually put in place what is needed. And we need a national fire authority because retained fire services might have been suitable back 30, 40 years ago in urban, in rural areas. But when we have a fire station in Bray that was built in the 80s to accommodate a full-time fire service, it was seen as a need back then. And here we have a population in Bray which has greatly increased since that time and due to increase even further with more risk of, dangerous buildings, high-rise buildings, nursing homes, as I outlined, Minister. So what we need is a full-time fire service within that area, because the challenges that the retained firefighters have to endure and go through on a daily basis to get to the station when they're in their workplace or in their home and the alerter goes off in their pocket, they have to battle through congested traffic in their own cars. They're not allowed to put sirens on or flashing lights to get to the station. There's massive challenges for them there, Minister. And there's also the restriction that they must live and work within a 5-minute radius of the fire station. And these are the reasons why they cannot retain and hold on to the new recruits. And that's why there was retirements last year, and there will continue to be retirements because of the pressures, the constraints that recruits and existing firefighters are actually under, Minister. So until the state actually stands up, lives up to the responsibilities of the state and implements the key recommendation of the Farrell Grant Spark report of 2002 and implements a national fire authority, and only then, taking the need to, I suppose, for local authorities to come up with the €1 million plus needed to establish a full-time fire service in Bray, that needs to be based on risk, and only that risk can be I suppose, brought forward through a national fire authority. So it's time to get serious here, or else we will be dealing with more tragedies.
Thanks, Chair. I suppose, like, I can hear your concerns, and you genuinely, obviously, are very passionate about this. I'm telling you, with regard to the Wicklow County Council, they tell me that they did have to make the decision last year to stop the recruitment, to try and bring it back up to what it was a number of years ago, which is twice the manned station that it has now. It currently has 10. It probably should have proficiency of about 6 or 7 more. They are going to recruit again in January, so I hope it's not too long before you see a full complement of the staff. As you say, when these stations were built where we live, we were living in the sticks. You can't really call Bray or Ashbourne the sticks anymore. We now are living in the metropolitan district of the Greater Dublin area, and I think you're probably right, they do need to be manned to reflect the changes in population increases over the times since they were established. Thank you, Chair.